This is the second week of our current message series for the Lenten season, all about the importance of perseverance. Perseverance in our faith, in our relationship with Christ and His church. In this season, more than any other time in our lives, our faith is being tested. Your faith is being tested. Believe me, I know my faith is being tested. We might not like that, but testing is actually a sign of God's favor, of God's love for us. Our faith grows in the same way muscles grow through testing, trial, exercise. God tests you because tests and trials, without tests and trials, you will not mature in faith. You will not go deeper in your relationship with Him. Testing prepares you for that. Testing prepares you for future blessing that you will not enjoy without perseverance. Much of the support systems in our culture for faith were already fading away pre-COVID. Now, as a result of COVID, they have absolutely collapsed. So, through the course of this series, we're going to look at how to persevere in our faith by looking at four key factors over the next 4 weeks. The first one we'll tackle today. All of us have had an experience or experiences where we were glad we persevered. Getting through graduate studies in graduate school was a key lesson in perseverance for me, perhaps the biggest one of my whole life. I studied in Rome at the Gregorian University. The Gregorian University, founded by St. Ignatius Loyola himself. It's the first, the oldest Jesuit institution, and is generally considered the premier theological faculty in the world. At least that's how they consider themselves. Humility has never been a problem for the Jesuits. Classes were taught in Italian, and I am no linguist. And they were intense, and I am no scholar. So to say the least, from day one, I was in over my head. More than once, in fact, fairly often, I considered leaving. I dreamed of quitting. Until that is, near the end of my first year. And I was called in by the academic dean, who suggested I consider transferring to another university. And I won't name the other university, but it would most certainly have been an easier path, and it most certainly would have been a considerable step down in terms of prestige. Well, that was it. That's all I needed to double down in my determination to succeed. I gave it everything I had. I worked as hard as I knew how, and to this day, my proudest possessions are the Gregorian University degrees that hang in my study. And it was through that experience I learned a key factor crucial to perseverance in faith. To take a look at it, we're going to take a look at a passage from the Gospel of Mark that Father Nicholas just read for us. It's an important moment in Jesus' life. It actually has a name. It's called the Transfiguration. The Transfiguration comes on the heels of another important moment. About a week earlier, Peter, the apostle, made the life-changing confession of faith that Jesus is the Son of God, the long-awaited Messiah. Jesus affirms Peter. He tells him that he's got it right, but then Jesus goes on to describe what must happen to him as the Messiah, and what he describes is very different than Peter's vision of the Messiah. As the Messiah, Jesus will be handed over to the Roman authorities by the Jewish leaders, and he will be killed. None of that squared with Peter's idea of the Messiah. He was expecting a victorious political and military figure who would destroy the enemies of the Jewish people and restore the fortunes of the nation. Peter didn't understand the idea or the need for a suffering servant such as Jesus described. And he also didn't understand that in order to follow Jesus, Peter, would also have to become a suffering servant. Jesus is victorious over sin and death by his death on the cross. Peter and the other apostles can't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to them. That looks like utter failure. Thus we come to the transfiguration. Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. Jesus had a community of core friends and followers who were called the apostles, but within that core group was an inner circle of three: Peter, James, and John, in whom he made the most investment. And they went on to become the key leaders of the early church. Jesus had a special relationship with each of them, and they knew him better than anyone else. In several instances we can read about in Scripture, Jesus would allow them to see what the others did not see, to see what the others were not shown, the intensity of his emotions, the effectiveness of his touch, the power of his prayer. Here in this instance, he shows another side of himself that he kept hidden from the rest of the world. Here's what happened. He was transfigured before him, and his clothes became dazzling white. Jesus allows his three close friends to see his divinity. The white clothing, a symbol of God's holiness and power and presence, a visible expression foreshadowing Jesus' resurrection. Later, Peter himself would write about this event, and he used to describe it the word majesty. We had been eyewitnesses to his majesty. In that moment, the majesty of Jesus shone through his humanity. And they needed to see that. They needed to see that majesty, that hidden glory, because they were going to see his public shame. The story goes on and gets even bigger. Then Elijah appears to them along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. It's a big moment as Jesus appears with two of the towering figures of the Old Testament, representing the law and the prophets, alive, back from the dead. It's a big moment. And then it climaxes in an even bigger moment. A cloud came, casting a shadow over them. From the cloud came a voice: "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus. It's the voice of God the Father speaking. And Mark doesn't tell us what that voice sounded like. He left that to our imagination. But he's perfectly clear about the message. This is my beloved Son, listen to him. In other words, Moses and Elijah, as great as they are only attendants to the glory of Jesus. This is my Son, listen to him. Listen to him even though he is going to be arrested and dragged through the city streets in chains and humiliated before everyone. Listen to him even though he's going to be hauled before a court of law and condemned like a common criminal. Listen to him beaten and bloodied, mocked and insulted, and then crucified and left to die on a cross. In a flash, in an instant, there is this theophany, this intense moment of divine revelation where it's so clear who Jesus is. It's dazzling, it's majestic, it's theatrical, and suddenly it's over. It's gone. It's a fleeting glimpse of the glory of God, and then it's gone. That's the nature of mountaintop moments. Quick peeks into a reality that's always there, but not always visible to the naked eye. Three of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, describe this episode of the Transfiguration. But of the three, it is Mark who emphasized that the event is for the benefit of Peter, James, and John. That's why it happened. Mark tells us that Jesus takes all three up the mountain. He is transfigured before them, for them. Elijah and Moses appear before them as well. God's voice speaks directly to them. The them is emphasized in Mark's account, perhaps because Mark learned about this event from Peter himself, who passed it on to him firsthand. Mark was a disciple of Peter. Jesus arranges this event to strengthen them in their faith together, to strengthen them in their faith together, to support one another for the tests and trials that would be up ahead. The point is to persevere in faith, to persevere in your faith, especially through trials and troubles and tests. You need friends in faith who can stand with you. At Nativity, small groups are the principal way we invite you to connect with friends in faith. I know that hundreds of you responded to my invitation to join a group for this Lent, so congratulations on that. But there are still opportunities available if you want to give it a try this season. Check it out on our website. Small groups are a great place to start when it comes to friends in faith. Another way is through Nativity missions, our mission service projects and our mission trips. Many members of our church have developed deep and lasting connections through mission trips and service. Those who have traveled to Kenya, Haiti, Nigeria, or even just West Baltimore have developed some very special bonds. Mission trips can also be mountaintop experiences. And when we get out of the bubble many of us inhabit, on those trips people often have moments where God becomes very real. They experience them with others, and those relationships last well beyond the trip. We have mission trips planned for this summer, which hopefully will be happening. In fact, our mission director, Caitlin DeGruchy, leaves this weekend for Kenya to lay the groundwork for our trip there this summer. But we also have dozens of local service projects available every single week. You can participate in person right here in Baltimore or from home. Check it out on our website. Then again, some other people, form those deeper kinds of bonds while working together in ministry right here on our campus, or currently in ministry from their homes. Serving together can form fast friends in faith. Ministry, missions, and small groups, we call them steps in faith. And the point is, these steps in faith that we talk about all the time and encourage you to take, create community. Among the other things they do, they create community. And it's in the relationships in that community that our faith flourishes. We think of perseverance as an internal virtue, and it is. But often we keep going because we know we're not all alone and on our own. There are other people who can stand with us, who can walk with us, and sometimes even carry us through the tests and trials that we have to face. There's actually one other part to my university story that I need to mention. At the Greg, that's what we called it, the Greg, one of the nicer names we had for the place. Our exams were all oral exams. And the classes were huge. There were hundreds and hundreds of people in a class, and the exams were given alphabetically. So the exam for a single class could take many days. The exam cycle for all the classes in a given semester could stretch out over 2 or 3 weeks, at least for those of us at the end of the alphabet. I was always one of the very last students to take my exams. And the student who was always just before me was Joe Vasquez, another American student from Houston, Texas. Joe and I became friends, and we formed the habit of studying together for our exams, studying together. But actually, if truth be told, we weren't really studying together. Joe, who was fluent in Italian and brilliant besides, Joe was tutoring me. Joe was mentoring me. Joe was coaching me. And he would even go with me to the exams and wait around outside to see how they went. I was able to persevere through that very challenging, very difficult, frankly, scary experience, not through sheer determination or willpower, but because Joe walked with me through it. By the way, Joe is now the Bishop of Austin, Texas, one of the largest, fastest growing dioceses in the country. And here I am, pastor of a little church in the woods. Proof positive, the system really does work. But the point is, of course, the immeasurable, the indispensable value of friends in faith.